All right, let's get back to our guests tonight. Our guests tonight are Joey and Holly Baird. They're the founders of the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener. You can go to the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Go check out all their videos on YouTube. They are made with so much professionalism and quality and so much, they're all like documentary style videos. Guys, again, I want to thank you so much for giving up a couple hours here tonight to be with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Before the news break, we started talking a little bit about, Holly, you mentioned about GMO versus non-GMO. Why don't you guys explain to us, what is, I hear this all the time, but for our listeners, what is non-GMO versus GMO and how Monsanto, I know there was a lot of marches on Monsanto and a lot of angry people. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, here's the thing. GMO is genetically modified organism. Now, what that term derives, it means, is they have went into a laboratory and altered the genetics or the DNA structure of that specific plant. The four notable plants are corn, soybeans, sugar beets, which 90% of the sugar in the United States, 100% of the sugar comes non-organic, the sugar beets, as well as canola. They've gone into the structure of the DNA and changed it. For example, for corn, they have gone in and taken the DNA from let's say a salmon that swims in a river in Alaska, and taken some of that DNA and encrypted it into that corn kernel DNA so that corn can be more tolerant to grow in colder climates in the United States. And this is what they've done to a number of very popular seeds: corn, soybeans, canola, sugar beet. There's a few other ones, but those are the big four. Now, non-GMO is the hybridization, where you take plant A, plant B, pollen them together, and you get plant C. No DNA altering of the internal workings of that seed whatsoever. That's the difference between the two. And the thing about genetically modified food, as Holly spoke earlier in hour number one, that there's not really been any tests done on this. The GMO thing really came to prevalence probably in the early to mid-'90s, is when all this came down. And this is what big ag industry does. When you see that tractor or that combine going through the field, they're harvesting genetically modified crops that goes to a facility that turns it into your cornflakes or your soy, your Kool-Aid, anything that has sugar, soybeans, or corn, or canola in it.
Unless it has, unless it's organic or non-GMO, or there's a non-GMO certification. So,
and the thing is, 66 countries in the world require genetically modified GMO labeling. Some countries refuse to even let it in on their land, but yet the United States has refused to acknowledge that they're even going to consider labeling it because they want to hide it, again, probably because of some of the population control potential things that they're trying to do in government. But that 66 countries say it's either got to be labeled or we're not allowing it, and some countries don't even allow it at all on their property, on their land.
Now, these farmers, unfortunately, they were sold. The way it was sold to them is that they could buy these seeds. They would have to buy new seeds every year, but they signed these contracts, and they were basically guaranteed that these seeds would grow. And because of this, they were sold that. So it's not the farmer's fault either. They were,
sure.
This is how they were.
Right, but I mean, if you're a farmer and you want to play in, big ag sandbox, you have to play with big ag sandbox tools. So what happens is the farmer goes to the seed supplier. Now there's Monsanto, there's DuPont, there's a number of other big biotech companies, but Monsanto's number one, DuPont's number two, and they say, hey, okay, I want this many, I'm going to plant this much land, I need this many seeds. Okay, that's fine. Farmer signs a promise saying, I will not save a single seed. Fine print says, if you do and we find out, we'll sue you, we'll take everything you own, and you'll be homeless. And that's what many farmers have happened to them, not because the farmer has necessarily saved the seeds, but because corn is air-pollinated. And air-pollinated corn can travel to up to, in some instances, 10 miles. So you may be a farmer that's all organic, growing all heirloom variety corn, and your neighbor down the road has GMO corn that walks over and pollinates your corn. The lawyers or lawyers' helpers from Monsanto come over and test your corn and go, you got genetically modified corn in your field, you either pay us or we're suing you. The farmer refuses to pay. They go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Monsanto because one of the Supreme Justices used to be a lawyer for Monsanto, who always is in favor of Monsanto's cases. The farmer loses everything he has, and that's the end of the story.
Right. Wow. You know, with these GMO modified seeds, are there human dangers in there?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I 100% believe there's human dangers. I think this contributes to, childhood obesity. I think it contributes to things like autism, to cancer, definitely to cancer. I mean, they show these lab rats that have these tumors growing on them. So I don't think it's good for us at all.
And again, 66 other countries in the world say, hey, label it or it's not allowed in our country. But here it's like, okay, we're not even going to worry about it. Just eat what we tell you to eat, and everybody's going to, that's fine.
Even things like Kraft mac and cheese. In the United States, they use artificial flavors and colors. In Europe, they are not allowed to have that stuff sent over there. So there's different mac and cheese made in the United States versus what's being sent to Europe, which is just blows my mind. I don't understand why they can't make the same stuff for Europe as they're making for the United States. But, whatever. I don't think it's good. And if the other countries are, denying this stuff or requiring it to be labeled or whatever, obviously we need to think about why they're doing that and maybe why we should avoid it.
Right. Now let me ask you this, and this is a question again. Our show, we started out several years ago talking about ghost hunting and ufology, and we definitely still keep along those topics, but we've kind of rooted out, if you will, and gone a few different directions. And again, talking about, being self-sufficient and gardening and prepping all comes into it. But that we've had a couple of different shows on chemtrails. Do you believe that there are aircraft up there that are spraying chemicals down on some of these fields and farms?
Absolutely. You'll talk to certain pilots who say that doesn't exist, but also depending on what group of pilots they decide to pick for this project, they're not going to tell every pilot in the world, hey, this is what we're doing, don't tell anybody. They're just going to select a few and say, okay, we'll pay this much money, keep your mouth shut, here's what we're doing. They're spraying aluminum alloy over the land. And if you look right before a frontal system comes in and you look up and the sky is real clear and you know tomorrow's going to be a cloudy day and it's going to rain, you can see a massive amount of chemtrails. Now, obviously, when a plane flies over, there's a certain amount of exhaust that comes out of that plane. That's a natural process, but that shouldn't linger for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. That should dissipate very rapidly,
right,
much like it does out of the exhaust of your car. So what is happening is they're spraying in areas that they know when the frontal system's coming through, so that aluminum alloy can be rained down or picked up by the moisture and cover the ground. And people say, well, this doesn't exist. Well, how come a couple of years ago Monsanto came out with an aluminum alloy resistant seed? Explain that one to me.
Right.
If this doesn't exist, why would they go to the levels that they have to create seeds that would be resistant to what is being sprayed in chemtrails?
Exactly. Well, and we've seen it out here in the Intermountain West. And matter of fact, I've got some good photos. I need to just find them on my data stick. I actually saw a 4-engine jet flying here about a month ago, and it was producing 4 contrails, and the contrails were dissipating quite quickly. But it also had 2 other contrails coming out right from the inboard wings, and those contrails, they lingered there for, I bet, an hour. They dispersed out. Of course, they widened way out, and then they eventually dispersed. And it's like, there can be a little bit of moisture on the wing, and it can produce a little bit of, steam or fog or even ice, but not something that's pouring out at the level it's pouring out at.
Absolutely. I mean, you can do some searching on YouTube, and the government's pretty heavy on trying to remove all this stuff that contradicts what they say. And you can see planes following big jetliners that all of a sudden there's nothing, and then the switch is thrown, and there's chemtrails, and then they'll shut it off, and then they'll turn it on. So if it's not out there, prove to me that it doesn't exist, and explain to me why this stuff lingers so long in the sky if it's just natural exhaust from planes.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree with you 10,000%. But yet a lot of people tend to think, well, that's just science fiction and what have you. But you can see, and it is interesting too, because it tends to create, when we see it out here, it creates massive checkerboard patterns that linger for a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, some people believe, and your listeners can believe what they wish, but some people believe that the United States government can do no wrong, and every decision that they make is in the perfect 100% favor of the U.S. citizens, and I don't think that is true.
I agree with you 100%.
It comes down to money.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about organic versus non-organic. You know, when we go to the store, when we start a garden, you'll see, you know, there's so much. I mean, it's kind of like fishing lures, guys. There's so many of them. You see all the different bags of, you know, organic topsoil, non-organic topsoil. What is the difference between organic and non-organic?
Well, when it comes to gardening, for us, organic means that we grow without using any sort of harmful pesticides, well, any pesticides in general, any harmful type of fungicides or herbicides, anything that's
not naturally
occurring. So if we add a fertilizer to our soil, it's going to be organic. If we use some compost, it's going to be organic. So it means that there's not going to be any sort of man-made materials. There's not going to be synthetic materials. A lot of these herbicides and pesticides also have like formaldehyde in them, so it might say natural, or it might say, you know, safe for vegetables. But then if you read the ingredients, it'll say something like formaldehyde.
And formaldehyde is what they embalm bodies with.
Right.
So
I don't want that in my garden. So that's one thing, is we make sure that we don't add anything to our soil, to our plants, that is harmful. So one thing is, you know, we try really hard also to do things like companion planting and being smart about where we plant, so that we can make sure that we don't really have to add anything at all. You can also add things that you have around your house, like Epsom salt, coffee grounds, banana peels, eggshells, whatever, to your garden as well to enhance the soil. Then there's the fake organics, which are things like Miracle-Gro, and I guess Miracle-Gro is probably the biggest one.
That's your big one.
Yeah, and that company is owned by Monsanto. It's owned by Roundup, and Roundup's owned by Monsanto. So that's
let's be clear. But you're very Monsanto. Monsanto is the big producer of Roundup.
Right.
Roundup is exclusively sold by Miracle-Gro. Now Miracle-Gro sells Roundup under the Monsanto name. Mm-hmm. So you talk to people and they say, oh, Miracle-Gro is not owned by Monsanto. But if I tell you, hey, I'm making a product and you're the only one in the world that can sell it, you're working for me.
Right, exactly. So like things like Scotts, Ortho, Roundup, Miracle-Gro, they're all under the same umbrella. So you will never catch us using Miracle-Gro anything, whether it's organic or not, in our garden.
Is Miracle-Gro bad?
It's not bad, but at the same time, I just think about I like to do what I call voting with my dollar. So if I'm putting my money out there, I want it to go towards maybe a smaller company local, you know, as opposed to giving my money to Monsanto.
Well, and Miracle-Gro, from the research that we've been able to come up with, and the reliable resources that we were able to speak to, it comes from urine from cows.
Yeah.
And there's so much pesticides, antibiotics that are pumped into these cattle. I think it's like 41 tons a day that are pumped into cattle in the United States. So they're taking this urine and drying it out into a pellet form, or in some cases I think it's a liquid form, and you're spraying it on your plants. Well, that instantly gives that plant an energy drink, like crack is essentially what we call it, is plant crack. So whenever you spray your plants with this, they instantly perk up and go, oh, I feel great. Well, if you stop doing this, that plant basically goes into withdrawal and doesn't produce hardly anything at all, or produces very poorly compared to if you were consistently giving it that plant crack.
Gotcha. Now, I know, speaking of, our tomatoes today, I have used Miracle-Gro. I've got some in the garage. I've used it in the past. but our tomatoes just looked so tired, I guess is the word I could use. They just did not look healthy. They're getting very big. But today we actually went out to the local garden center and we picked up four 1 cubic foot bags of organic manure, of cow manure. And we took that and we spread that all over, kind of raked it in with the dirt and put it heavy around the plants. And then we watered it real good. And I have to say that we did that probably around 1 o'clock. Before I went to the show, I looked out back. I would say that cow manure, those plants looked like they turned 3 or 4 shades green darker after applying that cow manure.
Right, and that's because of the nitrogen, and nitrogen is definitely going to help your plants be green and look green, and that's definitely going to be a benefit to your plants. Now, our concern, we get a lot of questions about this, is
okay.
what were the cows fed? Were they fed, grass? Were they fed GMO corn or GMO feed? What were these cows fed? So sometimes you just think about, obviously you're putting cow manure on your plants, which isn't terrible. It's good for your plants. But at the same time, are you putting what is their waste derived from? And a lot of people, to feel they have a true organic garden, if they're going to put cow manure on their garden, they're going to put cow manure from an organic cow, a cow that's been, not fed any hormones or antibiotics or GMO corn.
Right, and that's what the bag actually said. It was from grass-fed cow.
Okay, there you go. That's perfect.
Now, I know that you guys, I see on your video and on your website, the manure tea, you guys are using that all the time. Does that work really, really well?
It does. It works well. It feeds your plants, and the best part about it is these cows are the happiest cows. They're not fed any hormones, any GMO corn. They're grass-fed cows, and they're just happy cows.
Right, and the nice thing about this kind of compost tea is you don't have to have air stones, and it doesn't smell. You just put it in 1 to 5 gallons, throw the tea bag in there 1 to 3 days, put it right on the plant. It does not burn the plant, and it allows the foliage absorbs it in, and it's a wonderful product that the owner is anti-GMO and wants to make sure gardeners have a product out there that she can believe in, that they can believe in, that it's healthy for their garden.
Yeah, man, it's called manuretea.com. I've been on the website, a link off of your site, and we actually are going to order some up next week because it looks like it has just produced some great results for you. And again, I think that people in general, it is amazing, and you don't have to be a gardener or a scientist or anything. When you go to your local, your local home improvement store, the couple of big ones that are out there, and you walk down that aisle that has all those plant fertilizers, plant foods, weed killers and stuff, all you got to do is take one whiff of what's in that aisle. It's about enough to floor you. It smells so bad, and it's like, do you want to eat? Are you going to spray that on and then start eating that after?
Right, and that's just, I can't even walk down those aisles because it just chokes me basically.
Yeah.
I don't want to have that on my plants. So
exactly. No, without a doubt, it's all you got to do is walk down that aisle one time, and the smell is enough to floor you. I can't imagine. Look at some of those pesticides and stuff. I can't imagine anything surviving getting sprayed with that.
Well, and that's the thing with this GMO crop. They are designed to handle the farmer spraying Roundup, which kills everything. But that DNA structure is changed to where it will resist that spraying of Roundup, but it'll kill all the other weeds. And now the weeds have become they become super weeds. They become Roundup resistant. So now Monsanto is looking into upping the Roundup formula to very close to what we sprayed in Vietnam, which was Agent Orange.
But now it's called 2,4-D.
Now it's called 2,4-D, so they can spray on the weeds to actually kill the weeds, so the weeds don't overtake the crops that they're trying to grow.
Gotcha. So what type, and this was I'd like to get to some of the questions that were sent in because we got so many. What type of fertilizers do both of you use, if any at all?
Well, we use the manure tea. We also use a line called Winchester Gardens, and they have a great line of organic fertilizers. And then we use stuff that we have around the house, coffee grounds. We have a compost pile, so we add our compost from kitchen scraps, leaves, grass clippings, yard waste, whatever. And then we add things like, did I say Epsom salt?
Epsom salt, yeah. But we also start with a base of good organic certified leaf compost from a local company that distributes in the upper Midwest, SiouxComposting.com. They strictly deal with composting leaves that are gathered from the state of Wisconsin in the fall, and it's black gold. So with that, in combination with the Mineral Tea, in combination with the Winchester Garden line of organic fertilizer, we are very, very happy with the results that we get.
Right.
Gotcha.
But then, you can, like I said, the coffee grounds help. They add nitrogen to your soil. The worms love them, and they're plants love them also. The worms feed off of them. So that helps. And Epsom salt also helps the plant so that it encourages the plant. And you can use this in your vegetables, flowers, herbs, whatever. It encourages the plant to uptake nutrients from the soil. Something in the Epsom salt, the magnesium sulfate, encourages chlorophyll and proper plant growth. So you can do that as well. Another trick we use is we put whole grain cornmeal around our tomato plants to prevent early blight.
Now, with the Epsom salt, do you around tomatoes? Do you just? I mean, you buy it from the store? Do you sprinkle just a little bit of around, or do you mix it in with the dirt and the compost, or how do you apply that?
If you're going to put it across your garden, you can just sprinkle it all in, and then once it rains, it'll help work it into the soil. Or if you don't have rain predicted in the near future, you can always water in as well. If you are going to water in, then I would put it, just around each plant. That way, you don't have to necessarily, water your whole garden. You can water on each plant, whatever.
One handful is adequate per plant. You're not going to hurt the soil if you put too much. I mean, obviously, you put 10 tons.
Right.
A handful around each plant would be adequate, watered in, and you're going to see a much happier plant as a result of that.
Gotcha. Tracy writes in, and I actually was going to ask this question as well. She went to her local gardening store the other day, and when she was checking out, she bought some plants and some stuff like that, and she saw these bags, these silk bags, that contained about 1,100 to 1,200 ladybugs. Are these a good thing to purchase and let go in your garden?
Absolutely. Ladybugs are the army for your garden.
Right.
They will go, and if you have an infestation of any bug, well, they'll just keep everything in check. But for instance, let's say aphids or little white bugs that really destroy a plant in no time at all, those ladybugs will attack those aphids. You want to release the bug. You want to release the ladybug. On the back of the package, it does have specific instructions, but you want to do it right at dusk because ladybugs will have less tendency of flying out of your garden and somewhere else at nighttime. And you also want to put them around any places where you are, where you fear that there is an infestation of bad insects. But absolutely the best thing, one of the best things you can do for your garden is get ladybugs.
Yeah, because she was saying a package of them, a pack of 1,200 was like $10. It was a silk bag, and there was just tons of them in there, and just was curious if those would be good. I also understand. I thought somewhere down the road somebody told me praying mantises are also good for your garden. Is that true?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, they are very good. They also are similar to the ladybugs. They will go in, and though they will, they'll freak you out if you're not expecting them.
Right.
But they are some of the best warriors for your garden. Them and ladybugs work well together in the garden.
Now let's talk a little bit about composting. I've watched most of your videos, and I see that in the winter months you guys are out there all bundled up in your coats. What is the best thing to do? I mean, with a compost pile, it's something I ended up having by having all those old leaves and all those pine needles and all the stuff that I raked up into a pile, and then winter caught up on me. So I guess I had a compost pile. But what's the best way to compost? How would you suggest people that want to, get a what's the best way to build it, and what's the best thing to throw in it?
Well, you want to make sure that you can have where you live, some places they allow you to have a pile, in itself, an open pile. Some places want it to be contained, or some places want to be above the ground. So you want to make sure you know where you're going to put it or have it is allowed. So that's number one. Number two, you want to have a good mixture. You want to have a good mixture of green versus brown, and then you can put pretty much yard waste. I wouldn't suggest taking your neighbor's yard waste or anything like that because you may not know what's in their yard waste, what they've been spraying around. But your own yard waste, you can put food, anything but meat or dairy, basically. So vegetable scraps, fruit scraps,
shredded paper, cotton. If you have like a regular T-shirt, I would suggest cutting it up first so it can break down quicker. But yeah, the smaller the particles, the quicker it will break down. But the thing that we have seen far too often is people make composting a scientific project that they try too hard with. Don't make composting a difficult thing. Just put everything in a pile, and some materials will break down much more rapidly than others. But in time, it will break down. Don't complicate it.
Right. Yeah. So you can add in your organic matter. Like I said, just you don't want any meat, dairy, bones, anything like that because that will attract animals, and I'm sure it probably just wouldn't be good for the compost either.
Right.
So,
no oils.
No oils, yeah, that either. So you want to mix it all up, and we found that if you can't have a pile that you can actually fork through, then you can get like a big 40-gallon garbage can, and then you want to drill some holes in it so it can have the heat and everything escape. And if you can get one with like a locking lid, that way you can roll it around to mix it up, and that seems to work really well. Or you can, there's a lot of information for making the do-it-yourself turning one or whatever. You can look into it. It depends on how much you want to spend, but we're very thrifty, so we're gonna try to keep it low cost as much as possible.
Now, do you go out there in the wintertime and when you're not planting, do you go out there and turn it over and fork it over with a pitchfork?
No, especially not this past winter. No, it'll break down during the winter. I think ours broke down almost to about 2/3. It was about a third left of what we had.
Wow.
So yeah, it'll break down in its own.
But much slower.
Yeah, much slower. Yeah.
Now, do you take your the question I had for you at the end of the year? Now, you guys go out there with you take your plants and obviously that's how you get your seeds for your next growing season. Let's say like with your tomato plants and your all the green stuff that's left over, do you throw that in the compost pile? I know some people rototill it back into the ground. I believe I saw an episode or two, Joey, you said you're not a big fan of rototilling.
No, I'm not. And the reason being is in the soil, in good soil, worms are prevalent. I think right now we have on average about 24 worms per per cubic foot, which is immaculate. 10 is average. So if you go in there with a rototiller, rototillers are designed to completely eradicate and turn the soil from a dense consistency into a powder. Well, in that process, you're murdering thousands of worms too, and it takes a while to redevelop that population of worms. Now, if you go in there with a shovel and you just flip the soil over and then you take the hoe and loosen it up, you're damaging and hurting much fewer worms than rototilling. And the other thing is, soil has developed microbial bacteria in it, and by killing it, you're destroying all those microscopic tunnels for all that microbial bacteria. So you're just hurting yourself in the long run by tilling it up, though it may be very convenient. You're destroying a lot of worms, you're destroying a lot of microbial bacteria, and also the pathways that the worms and the microbial bacteria have created, that you're just going to have to wait even longer for all of that to repopulate itself in your garden.
Gotcha. What do you suggest at the end of the year when everything is done growing? Do you suggest chopping up the plant vines and stuff and turning them over, or putting those in your compost pile? I know some people bring in more. I mean, what do you suggest at the end of the growing season?
Well, if you have time and you don't have a snowstorm before Thanksgiving like we did, if you have the time, you can go ahead and you can pull the plants out, put them in your compost. You can pull them out and just lay them across, where they were. You can do that too, because they'll break down over winter. This past year, we actually had to leave them, and we ended up pulling them out and putting them into compost in the spring. That's usually the best thing. Some people will take things like old rugs and lay them over their garden to let it break down over the winter, and that seems to work well for them as well.
Now, when putting the old dead plants in the compost pile, if those plants were diseased in any form or fashion, go ahead and toss them in the trash, because you don't want to have the potential of introducing that disease into your compost pile, and your compost pile may not be hot enough to break down those diseases, or those diseases may not break down no matter what temperature they're at, and then you're reintroducing those back into your garden, and then you're facing more problems the following growing season.
Gotcha. Jenny writes in and she says, I love watermelons and I love pumpkins, guys, but they take over everything. Do you have any suggestions how to keep pumpkins and watermelons at bay?
Well, one thing you can do is you can grow smaller varieties, and you can kind of trellis them. You may have to, once they get bigger, you may have to support them with, some netting or old pantyhose or something.
Right.
But you can trellis them, and that way they can, when you trellis, they will grow up. But then you have to make sure you watch them and make sure that, you're taking care of them.
Yeah, and a typical pumpkin, an average pumpkin or an average watermelon can take potentially 30 to 40 square feet.
Right.
And not every backyard has that availability or that real estate to dedicate to getting 2 or 3 watermelons. Now, and we like watermelon and pumpkin just as much as the next person. If that is an issue, that space thing, find either a friend or a neighbor that has, that kind of space, or go to your local farmer's market and keep the dollars circulating in your own community. That's another option that may be available.
I noticed some of these plants. A matter of fact, today I love cucumbers, and I know cucumber, they tend to get pretty, they get pretty viney, and it's just amazing. Some of the squash, especially like summer squash, I swear, guys, some of these plants, I think they grow a foot, sometimes a foot in a day or two.
Right.
Yeah, some of the summer squash, some of the melons, if watered adequately and they have the right amount of moisture, they can put on 8 to 12 inches in a day without an issue at all.
Yeah. Can you cut them back a little bit?
The summer squash, we're talking about summer squash being zucchini, crookneck zucchini, that type of item. You can cut back the leaves once the fruit has produced. The summer squash produces, we call it a bush, but it really is a very short vine.
Right.
And you can, as the vine produces fruit, where that fruit is placed or grows on that, from that position, from that fruit being on the vine, back to the roots or the ground where it comes out of, you're not going to have any more production in that area. It's going to continue to grow outwards, and that's where the new growth of fruit is going to be. So you could cut back the limbs to the stalk and maximize a little space there. I know that was a horrible description of what I was trying to say, but you can maximize a little bit of space that way. The other viney crops, our suggestion is don't touch it. Let nature do its thing, because the more that us humans try to help the plant, in some cases, the more we hurt the plant.
Well, can you, if you get like cucumbers and some of these viney plants, can they actually, if you get them too near tomato plants or peppers, can they actually choke out those plants?
Yeah, they can shade them. We'll shade them out, one thing, and I don't know if they would necessarily choke them out, but you definitely, you don't want to let them get, too crowded. Plants, just like humans, they also need air to grow. Not just sunlight, not just water, not just nutrients, but also air. So you definitely want to give yourself enough space. Gotcha.
So watch out on what you plant. And it seems like those things, again, a couple pumpkin seeds in the ground and the right type of soil, it can go nuts. Let's talk a little bit about canning. Again, I've watched a lot of your videos, Holly, and Carol has too, and she's sorry she's not here tonight. We've watched, you cook a lot of good stuff up. Obviously, when you get to the size garden that you guys have, your big garden there, and I assume there's 2 of you, you're sharing, there's a lot of food to eat there for 2 people. You can a lot. Will canning food, of course it makes you more self-sufficient. The stuff tastes great. If it's done properly, can it last for many years?
Some things, yes. Some things you do want to eat within the year. You know, if you stretch it to 18 months or 2 years, it's not terrible, but it's just a freshness factor. You know, you want to be the best tasting, and in that case, it's generally within, you know, about a year or two, and that's what's going to happen. And if you're canning to extend your harvest, then yeah, you're going to usually eat it within that year anyway. So that's what the kind of rule of thumb you go by, especially the National Center for Home Food Preservation. They say, you know, within a year to 2 years is what's best to eat the items.
Now you guys again have a lot of videos on canning. Is it difficult to do or not too bad?
You know, if you can follow a recipe, you can can.
Okay.
There is a science, you know, and you want to make sure that you're canning, you know, low acid foods properly with pressure canning, or, you know, adding things like vinegar or bottled lemon juice to change the acidity, because it is a science, and if you don't follow the science correctly, then that could be bad.
Yeah, don't just go, well, my grandmother canned or my mom canned. I think I remembered it. So I'm just going to do it that way. No, don't do that.
No.
Go in with an open mind and start fresh. And though your grandmother and mother may have done it correctly, make sure you review everything, because, again, like Holly said, if you don't do it correctly, you can get botulism, and you don't recover from botulism.
Right.
They put formaldehyde in you when you're dead.
Right.
Right.
So you want to make sure, and, you know, we're not trying to scare anybody, but you do want to make sure, like I said, canning is a science. So there's, you know, steps you have to follow. You want to make sure you're adding acid to what needs to be added, like I said, there's vinegar, bottled lemon juice, what have you, and you would want to follow the recipe. Now, I would recommend, you know, checking out the websites like Ball, like the Ball Blue Book, the National Center for Home Food Preservation. Better Homes and Gardens even has a couple books out there that are really good. So, and you want to make sure the recipe is within the past 15 years, because within the past they discovered that, you know, the way your grandma or your mom canned wasn't necessarily the best way to can or the safest way to can. But canning can be a lot of fun. You know, Joey and I usually will spend, once we get the harvest going and everything, we'll spend, you know, the whole weekend or part of the weekend doing some canning. And it's also fun to, if you find some books that are recent, you can find books about small batch canning. You can make some really gourmet and fun jams or jellies or different things. So it's definitely something to do.
Well, yeah. Again, we've watched your videos, and yeah, it is you grow a lot. You know, you have a lot of cool things, and again, the canning part, after you do all the effort of after you go through the effort of growing the stuff and nurturing it, to be able to keep it around for a while is good. I mean, fresh stuff, it's just what it is. It's fresh. It only lasts for so long, but if you can, you know, preserve it for a while, you can enjoy it for a long time.
Right. And, you know, if you don't want to commit to canning, there's also things like dehydrating and freezing. You know, I have a friend, she has 4 children, and they freeze a lot of stuff because she just doesn't feel she wants, you know, she'd be too distracted to go through the whole canning process. So there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, some people would rather invest in some jars, or deep freeze. But if you think about it in a sense of, I guess, self-sufficiency being kind of a semi-prepper, when you have cans, then you don't have to worry about if your electricity goes out, then you have stuff in a jar ready to
go. Tim writes in, says, Joey and Holly, I got a beautiful garden, but I'm having a problem with deer and rabbits. They're eating everything. What can I do to keep them away?
Well, the thing with rabbits is you want to get a shorter fence. You can get about a 2 foot tall fence, you know, some chicken wire or
Poultry netting.
Poultry netting is what they call it now. And, you could use that, put that on your garden. As far as deer, you know, you might have to get a taller fence because deer don't care. They'll just walk through it.
Also, now, one thing about deer, based on how much space he has available, deer have a tendency, and I've seen this on some very successful results, if you have a fence, let's say 6-foot fence next to the garden, and about 3 foot beyond that, you put another fence, and this is requiring quite an investment. Deer they won't jump over the one fence and then jump over the second fence. They get all screwed up in the head when they see that double fence, and they won't proceed. They'll just go back to where they came from. When there's like a fence, walk past a fence, they don't have a tendency of wanting to cross both of those fences. So I don't know if that is a potential thing.
There's another thing I read, I believe it was in like Mother Earth News or something, where if you take fishing line and you put that, you stretch it across about, you get some posts, put it from corner to corner or whatever, and you want to do it so it's up to, about every 6 to 12 inches, make different lines. And that way when the deer try to approach the garden, they're going to get hit in the face with the fishing wire, the fishing line, but then they don't necessarily see it. I don't know if it works or not, but I did read that it was a good idea.
Keeps them away.
Yeah.
Our friend Bob out on the East Coast writes in and says, guys, how do you keep insect damage off apple trees without using chemicals? He says, I get black spots on my apples and I don't want to eat them.
Well, we don't really know much about that. I guess you have to figure out what kind of insect is eating your apples and then do some research. A lot of times we recommend checking out your university extension. They have great information.
And they know what insects are in your specific area and the ones that they've got record of what has been potential problems over the last 10 to 15 years.
Right. So
Gotcha.
Doing a little research and what may be a problem in Milwaukee, Wisconsin may never have ever existed in Buffalo, New York, for example. So our local extension offices are a wonderful resource to a backyard garden, and they are more than happy to assist you with whatever question, no matter how crazy you may think it being.
Right, and they, everybody in the area might be having the same issue, so it's definitely something to contact them.
I also know, like here we have in Utah, for our local listeners here, the University of Utah has a couple of extensions, and they have actually quite a few videos, and they'll do soil sampling, I believe, for free, and you can just give them a call. So even the local universities that teach that would probably be another good place to pick up the phone and give them a call and tell them your problem.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Your videos, guys, like I said, they're outstanding, and the amount of work that you put into them. I swear, every other day I tune in to see a new one, and you guys, you keep pretty busy with this stuff.
Yeah. Right now we're pushing out, I believe, 5 a week right now, based on the different series. 4 or 5. I don't know. Based on a different series, and we keep it. We have a dry erase board, and we write down, here's what I think people would be interested in knowing about, or how to potentially, here's a problem we're experiencing in our garden, maybe other people will. So it's not just go out in the garden, let's talk about peppers today. We do it as a full-time job that we don't get paid for, but we greatly, greatly enjoy it. And we look at it as being, you've taken time out of your day to tune into our program to potentially learn something. We're not going to waste your time. We're going to get right to the point. We're going to give you the information that we have found adequate, and the research that we have done proves our point, so you can be a better gardener.
Gotcha. What about corn? In the past I've tried to grow corn, and I haven't had much success with it. Is that a touchy thing to grow?
It can be. It depends on, you want to grow it in a group so it can get pollinated correctly.
Or a block.
Yeah, a block, yeah.
Which is, 4 rows of 10 or 10 rows of 20.
Right.
And based on who you talk to, backyard sweet corn growing is either the greatest thing since sliced bread or the worst invention since the space shuttle. Because it takes so much time and so much energy for that plant to grow and to produce 1, possibly 2 years of corn, when you could put a tomato plant in that area, and a tomato plant could produce upwards of 40 to 50 pounds of tomatoes. So it's really at the discretion of the gardener. But corn is a very heavy nitrogen feeder, as well as it needs to be grown in blocks, which all that is indicating is as the plant reaches maturity, it puts a little tassel on the top, and that has pollen, and that pollen will drop down and pollinate the ear, that hairy stuff that's halfway up the stalk, and that's where that's where that corn develops. Every one of those hair follicles is connected to the potential of a kernel that will grow inside of the husk. So we have done a block of sweet corn, 10 by 4, or 4 by 10, as well as we're being creative this year and doing 2 separate container garden type of corn, which there's 2 smart pots with 4 corn in each smart pot, and we're going to see if we can do it that way as well in self-watering containers.
You know, and if you don't have the time, space, patience, whatever for it, you can find it at, here you can find it on every corner practically in August.
Right.
So, that's another option is check out, local farmers market, whatever, and just sometimes that's easier than dealing with the frustration.
Gotcha. We've only got a couple minutes left. I'm going to ask you just one more question, and this is an interesting question, and I don't know if you've been asked this before, but for so many years, houseplants, people always said, talk to your plants. What do you think about that? Do you guys talk to your plants?
We do. I mean, we don't ask you how it's doing, but we just say, oh, you look good today, or I don't know. What do we say to the plant?
Well, the thought behind is the vibration of your voice tickles or moves the leaves, and that stimulates the plant.
Yeah.
And basically makes the plant feel good, or the hormones in the plant feel good. So that is the thought process behind talking to your plant.
It's like talking to your cat or your dog.
Right.
They know that you're there for them and that you love them. But are they going to benefit from it? Probably not. We don't know. They still feel. I guess we want the plants to feel the love. That's why you take care of a plant. You let it grow. You feed it, whatever. You water it, and same thing with anything else that's growing. You want to show it some love.
Sounds great. Joey, Holly, I want to thank you so much for the 2 hours went way too quick. The website for our listeners is the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Go check it out. If even if you put a couple of milk cartons out with a little bit of dirt, and I'm not sponsored by them, but here in Salt Lake City, Shopko, the Shopko stores are like a small version of a Target. They've got some unbelievable garden centers out there right now. The plant prices are very low. A little 6-pack of tomatoes is $1.29. You can't beat that. Get a thing of and they're about 6-7 inches high. Get some dirt and give it a try and get a couple tomatoes out of the garden and enjoy a great meal. Guys, I want to thank you again. It was an honor to have you here tonight. We'd love to get you back on in the fall again. And again, all I can say is thanks for all that you do. You've educated us very, very much, and we'll continue to watch your stuff.
Yeah, and we appreciate you having us on. If anybody has any questions, feel free to go to our website. On the right-hand side, we have a red button that says Questions, Ask Us, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, and Holly also talked about a little couple-minute thing. I'll email you after the show or in the next day or two. Let's get that on here as well, because people will be gardening all summer long.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us on.
Okay, guys, have a good night. Have a great weekend. Take care, and thank you so much.